All right, we are recording and live.
Okay, very good. Welcome, everyone. We will start the Newburyport Historical Commission meeting via Zoom in just a moment. We're just kind of signing in a couple of our members into the call. So we'll just officially start in just a moment. So bear with us. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, good. There's welcome. Did you find Chris?
See, so I found Malcolm Carnwath, and I have not seen Chris Fay yet. But I'll keep
I'm here.
Yep. Yeah, got you, Malcolm. We're looking for Christopher Fay. Should be in that list of attendees. Sorry about this. Zoom meeting annoyances. Hopefully, just give us a minute and we'll get through this.
Glennis, Caitlin, you can go ahead and start if you'd like, and I'll keep an eye out for Chris.
Okay, yeah, I can start the preliminaries so we can get those going. Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order. It's the, as I said, the 28th of October meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission conducted via Zoom. We'll do a roll call in just a moment. I'll just go through some of the rules. You're probably already familiar with them, that only the commissioners will have their audio enabled, and except that we will enable either one member of the public or obviously the applicant will be enabled when it's their time to speak. Members of the public during public hearing periods will be recognized one at a time. So if and when there's a public comment period, if you wish to speak, what you need to do is raise your hand so we can see that you wish to do that. And then you use the controls in the Zoom application on your device to do that. If you're using a telephone, it's *9 to raise or lower a hand and *6 to mute and unmute. You once we recognize you by calling your name, you would then that means we will have you unmuted on our end. You'll also need to unmute yourself on your local device. So let me do the roll call now of our board members. So we're starting with Mr. Carnwath. You're here?
Here.
Okay, thank you. Mark Sandrone.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Christopher Fay, did we get him in?
Here. Can you hear me?
Great. Yep, we can hear you. Very
All
good.
right.
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
here.
Fay. Peter McNamee.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Joe Morgan.
Here.
And the chair, Glenn Richards, present. Commissioner and Vice Chair Patricia Pecknick has recently resigned the board. Also present, Caitlin Sullivan, planner, and Gretchen Joy, note taker. Is Andy planning on joining us tonight? Caitlin, do you know?
He's not present right now, but we'll hope to join if he can.
Okay, so let's begin. We have a demolition delay application. I believe Attorney Lisa Mead is speaking on behalf of the applicant. The property is at 4 Plum Street. I'll kick right off by saying that in the memo from Attorney Mead, she suggested that the applicant has suggested that the structure is historically significant and preferably preserved, although they wish that the commission might approve the proposed plans after the demolition plan review. So since they don't really object, does anyone on the board have any comment or question about the historical significance of this particular structure? Because otherwise we can go directly to a motion to that it is historically significant and preferably preserved. And I should say, is Attorney Mead unmuted? I just should check in that that's, yeah, you are unmuted, Attorney Mead. I assume that that's okay with you?
It's fine with me, Mr. Chair, but I do miss going through all these old plans. It's a lot of fun. So I'm happy to have the board make that determination. No problem. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. So is there such a motion, or we could, there, I see that there are line queued up a series of historical maps and so forth about this particular property. And I think we will go through those anyway, Attorney Mead, just quickly, just so that we have the historical context. I agree, they are helpful. So is there either any comment, question, or motion from the board here? The motion would be to move that the structure is historically significant and preferably preserved. No one cares to make the motion?
So
I'll
moved.
make a motion that it is historically significant and preferably preserved. This is Chris.
Okay. All right, thank you,
I'll
Mr.
second that
Fay.
motion. Mark Sendron, I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. 1 second. Okay, so we'll go around. Malcolm Conworth, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mark Sendron.
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Thank you. And the chair is votes yes as well. So that determination is made, which opens the door to a public hearing, which has been duly noticed and so forth. I'm confident. And at this point, we usually open it up first to the presentation from the applicant. Then after that, we can take public comment. So Attorney Mead, you can take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa, 30 Green Street in Newburyport. With me this evening is Mike Buchan and Anna Wallach, who are the owners of this property. They live here with their children. It's one of these great stories. Anna is a graduate of Newburyport High School. To date myself, I was lucky enough to hand her diploma when she graduated. Her mom lives around the corner and is a lifelong resident. So they had lived away for a while and they have moved back here with their children. I'm with them this evening and also with the architect, Jeff Alsop, on the project. And this project is at 4 Plum Street, which is a really great little street off of Elm and Olive in our great city, right just north of Olive, as I said. So specifically, the applicant is proposing to construct a dormer that meets the requirements of the ordinance or the guidelines. Also to remove and replace an existing gable roof system and have an upward extension as part of an addition that's being built over a current 1-story mudroom that exists on the property. And then the addition of a bay window on the eastern side of the structure. The property is pre-existing non-conforming. It's on a very small lot, not unusual for this area of what we refer to as the north end on Plum Street. So if you can go to the first slide, please. So the property was, the house was constructed on around 1800, 1850, according to the assessor's records, but the district data sheets would be more accurate. It's certainly listed as contributory. We are not removing more than 25% of the exterior walls, and therefore a DCOD permit is not needed. It is described as a timber frame half house in the district data sheets. There is no Form B, as I said. The later added 1-story bump out doesn't appear on any of the Sanborn maps or even on the 1924 assessor's map. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll just quickly go through these, Mr. Chair, just for orientation. So on this slide, and toward the bottom on the left-hand side, you can see a yellow dot. That is the house. You see Olive Street on the right. Elm Street is on the left. Plum is a very short little street, and it runs down and is parallel, to Merrimack Street. Next slide, please. And then this is the next Sanborn map. And again, you see it's the same footprint and obviously in the same location. Next slide, please. Again, on this slide, you see the same footprint, same location. Next slide, please. And then here again, we have the same footprint. So you can see that this mudroom addition was much later. Well, it's certainly later added after 1924. And next slide, please. And then we have the same footprint. The neighborhood pretty much stays the same. And the next slide, please. And this is the 1924 assessor's map. So this is it's good to see this because you can see how the various houses sit on the property. There's a couple of 2 families around it. Number 4 is a single family and just sits right there on the corner with a little bit of a side yard. And they had an outbuilding in 1924 on the property as well. And if you could go to the next slide, please. So we have some photographs to show the context of the neighborhood. So this is looking up or down, down Elm. No, down Plum from Olive. Next slide, please. And so there's a little closer view in the same, at the same view closer up. And you see this mudroom on the addition that was later added at some point in time. So the proposed addition is being added right here in the side yard where the mudroom is, and then runs up into the roofing system, which Jeff will review in a little bit. Next slide, please. Again, a little closer up. This is a little earlier or after, the deck was removed. Next slide, please. And here we go, looking down Elm Street towards Merrimack Street. And nothing will be happening on this side except for the dormer that conforms to the guidelines on top. Next slide, please. And then this is looking up Elm toward the intersection of Plum and Elm. And next slide, please. So you've already done your determination of historical significance. So what the proposal is that Jeff is going to review in a minute, as I said, was to construct an addition where that mudroom is, over it and into the roof, and also to add the dormer that meets the guidelines, and to add a bay window as well. And after Jeff goes over what his plans are and how he intends to do this, I'm also going to show you some pictures of the neighborhood that shows these types of additions on these houses in the general area are not uncommon, nor are little bay windows that were later added. So with that, Jeff, I'm going to have you run through the architectural plans. And so, Caitlin, if you go to the next plan, please, and next slide, please, and the next one. So just as a site plan, if you could blow that up a little bit, please. So as you can see, here is the plan of the proposed addition. The footprint does not change. And you do have the little overhang that's going to be over the deck and the new entryway, which you'll see in the renderings in a minute. But the footprint essentially stays the same. And the next slide, please. And Jeff, I'm going to give it to you because these are your drawings.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. It's Jeff Alsop. I'm a architect and builder, design build firm out of Hamilton, Massachusetts. One slight correction is that these are our elevations, but the illustrations were done by Robert Liana, and I think he's done a very nice job depicting the character of the house and how it fits in. Might as well stay on this, I think. It's illustrative. This is the view from Elm Street on the left and looking down, I'm sorry, Plum Street on the left, and then looking down Elm Street on the right. We'll start on the illustration on the right. That's the shed dormer that meets the requirements. A little pop-up dormer there on Elm Street. And then in the illustration to the left, there is the bay window on the first floor. There's an entry. We've turned the entry towards Elm Street as a more welcoming way to enter, with a little yard in front, and then an overhang above, which creates a nice weather entry, and then the vertical addition going all the way up to the ridge. So I think a lot of the concern might be, why are we, taking the roof off the existing building? And what we've determined through a extensive measuring of the house and analysis of the structures and what we have to do to try to, both add these dormers, but also create a viable structure, is that we just want to take that gable structure down. It was stated as post and beam. It's not a great post and beam. There are certainly posts and beams. There are a lot of planks that we see in attics like this, but and purlins, but basically it's a very insubstantial frame. So what we're proposing is to simply remove that. It would be removed by 1,000 cuts if we were to try to save it. So there really wouldn't be much left of it at all anyway. So we're proposing to reframe that in a conventional way, get the proper installation, and reframe it in a way that will maintain the existing pitch and proportions. So I guess we can go to the next drawing. This is the existing elevations. I also included photographs there. Next one, please. It's proposed. That one essentially illustrates what we've been talking about. We've done a lot of work on old buildings. We do extensive work with the trustees of reservations, Mass Audubon. We also work with the Essex County Greenbelt. We've done numerous headquarters for all those organizations in old buildings. So we're fairly used to maintaining, the character and the quality and the materials of these buildings, but while also bringing them to very, very high performing buildings. In this case, we're going to be re-shingling with white cedar shingles, 5 inches to the weather. Any trim work, the rakes, the corner boards, window casings, all wood. We personally don't do any vinyl or composites, plastics, Boral or whatever. We stick with the wood, properly back primed, properly conditioned, and we find that we get great performance in terms of paint longevity and all the rest of it. The shingles are an architectural shingles. It is what is on the building now, and we would essentially maintain those color, basically the same brand or even shape. That's, I think, describes it. We've been going back and forth on whether we maintain the existing windows that have metal storms. We're eliminating the plastic shutters. But if we do go with a modern window, it will be with wood casings, with a historic sill, and then true divided lights.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
So as you can see from these drawings and from the renderings that Rob did, and thank you for reminding me that Rob did the renderings, the addition itself is proportional, similar style to the existing structure, including the gables. It is mostly to the side and rear of the structure, depending on where you're looking at it, of course, and is designed not to detract from the original form. The changes to the new addition, they're not an outlier in the neighborhood, as I'll show you in a moment. Rather, they're common to the surrounding neighborhood on Olive Street, Plum Street, and Elm Street. And one can walk through the neighborhood on foot and find many two-story additions to the rear and side of the structures, including dormers and bay windows. So if you go to the next slide, please, Caitlin. So here's a larger bay, but if you can look up the street, you can kind of see the larger structures right on the street. Of course, this addition is set back off the street. Next slide, please. Again, here is an addition that have been put on the side of this house. And in addition, the bay windows that are a part of this structure. Next slide, please. Again, there's an addition that's been put on the side and rear of this structure on Elm Street. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a funky addition that's been added. We'd like to add that because it does show that this is a very eclectic neighborhood, that people have worked with these older worker housing to get more space, as Jeffrey indicated, for more modern living standards, but still retain the historic structure. Next slide, please. And then here's a bump out in the back of this structure right next to the structure that's going to be worked on. And then I think the next slides are just the floor plans. So with that, I think, oh, excuse me, there's one more. And this is another bay window in the neighborhood. So with that, we'd like the board to release the demolition delay and approve the plans as presented. And we'll happy to take any questions.
Okay,
I would add
thank
one
you.
other thing, Mr. Chair. We've
Sure.
also provided the board with letters of support from the three most surrounding properties, 19 Elm Street, which is an immediate abutter, 18 Elm Street, which is right across the street, and then 12 Olive Street, which is the abutter to the rear. And then actually we have another one from Merrill Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next phase then would be to see if any members of the public would like to comment on this before turning it over to the board for comments, questions, deliberations, etc. Just a reminder, if you wish to speak, raise your hand using the Zoom controls. If you're on a telephone, you can still do it. Use *9 to raise or lower a hand, *6 to mute or unmute. And please identify yourself with your name and address as per usual in public meetings. And also please remember to lower your hand once you've spoken. So we'll officially open a public comment period, and we'll take a look to see if there are any members of the public with a hand raised that would like to speak. So allow just half a minute or so for people to do that or not. And after, well, I take a sip of water. I'm not seeing any. Are you, Caitlin?
I'm not at this time, Chair.
Okay, appears that there are that we do not have any public comment on offer, so we will close the public comment period, and I'll turn to my colleagues on the board for any questions. First, we'll start with if there's anything that they'd like clarification on from either the architect or Attorney Mead, or anything else you'd like to ask or comment on. Should I just kind of go around the horn? I can do that. We've been doing that lately. The way you show up on my screen is I have right next to me is Peter McNamee. Do you have any comments, questions, Peter?
I do have one question, Chair. The windows, the proposed windows, I thought I saw somewhere in the application, and maybe mixing it up with another application, that they were simulated divided light. And I think I heard something other or something different from the architect. So if we could just get clarity on that.
Yeah, that was one of my, thank you, Peter. That was one of my questions too. It sounded like Jeffrey said there was a little bit of a TBD there because it wasn't clear. It sounded like, at least from what I heard, that it wasn't, the final decision hadn't been made on that. So could you please clarify what exactly is the plan on the windows?
Yeah. So I'm gonna pipe up and then I'll let Jeffrey. So when we submitted the application, we were told that the windows would be the 6/6, keeping with the current window pattern, and will be SDL style windows with 3-dimensional muttons. The windows, by the way, right now, I think, I'm not sure what they are, but Jeffrey, if there's been a change to that, then.
No, sorry, that was a bit of a ramble on my part. Because we do often go through, discussions on that as we have with the with the client. And no, they are going to be single. They're going to be SDL thermal insulated with 3-dimensional mullions. So we're going to eliminate the storm windows and have a modern window.
Okay, yeah, I went by there today, I think it was, and it looked like I'd forgotten about the storm windows, but yeah, I believe there was storm windows, and behind which were, you know, regular old traditional sash with wooden buttons and so on. Is that correct?
That is correct. They're Brosco windows. They've been probably replaced in the 70s most recently. There's no there's no floated glass or or tenanted. They're not tenoned sash. It's just the ubiquitous Broscos.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. One other question on fenestration. In the addition, it looks like, and actually even in the old structure or the original or existing house, you've got like a triple window up there on the 3rd floor. It was hard to tell from the photos if that was existing like that or not. It looks like that's also a change. Is that correct?
That is a change. Yes, those windows in the gable end are new. The center window is the same proportion as what is existing now.
All right, thank you. How about Joe? Do you have any comments or questions? Joe Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Because this is an example of a structure that's going to be significantly altered with the roof reframed. I'd like to see a conditions report. I'd like to see a structural engineer conditions report from a preservation professional as a condition for approving it. Otherwise, I don't have a problem with it. I visited the site today. I think it's a reasonable and modest proposal. And I think the architect has done a good job at laying out the 3rd floor. It works really well. It's almost like magic that you can get so much stuff up there, but it's not increasing the footprint or the height. But I am concerned that with that level of invasive reframing, that you're going to find some load pathways in the floors below that might lead to additional unanticipated framing. And I'd like to see the conditions of the foundation in that report, as well as generally all existing bearing conditions within the lower 2 floors.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yep. Okay, but I was just going to say, okay, yeah, go ahead.
So, that's a pretty significant undertaking to bring back to the commission. The architect has to meet certain requirements. It's the building inspector's job to make sure that the house is built properly. And I guess I would like to have comments from Mr. Alsop on that. But obviously in this kind of renovation, he's going to have to employ, if he hasn't already, a structural engineer. But to go into all of the detail to come back to the commission for, I don't know that that's quite frankly the commission's role. If the commission is saying to me, you want that as a condition before the building inspector issues a building permit, well, that's a different conversation. But I guess, Mr. Alsop, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I can. I think the building is not a well-built building, and it basically from the ground up. The foundations made a lot of work, pointing, restoring brick. It's a lot of water damage, as you can, maybe ascertain from the photos on the street. So, when we rebuild this, you're correct. We are going to have to carry loads, down in interior walls and make sure that it all starts from the ground and goes up. It is our intention not to have any of that impact or be visible or translate to the exterior of the building. It all goes back together, and everyone wonders how it happened. So I do concur with Lisa that, you know, we have a lot of experience and we'll have a very open and very, you know, positive relationship with the building inspectors in the city.
Yeah, and I think my understanding is that is pretty cool, more or less closely aligned with what Attorney Mead is suggesting, that there is kind of an interplay, but it's mainly the building commissioner's job to ensure that when, especially a job of this size, that you know, work through those issues, as structural issues with you, and determine what will need to be done, and they'll no doubt be pre-inspections and inspections along the way, and all that stuff. So it's not clear to me, Joe, that we could actually require that, and except in the case where someone is suggesting a full demo due to existing conditions. But I think that, you know, I think I know where you're coming from. I know there's been, the city has, there was 1 or 2 rather unfortunate incidents where the owner or developer or builder or someone, you know, kind of went beyond their what they were permitted to do because they started encountering conditions they hadn't anticipated. But I think that the remedy for that is it has already pretty much been put in place with the affidavits that people taking out permits are now required to sign as making clear that they understand what the limits of what they're being permitted to do is, and the restrictions on what they can and cannot do, and how far they can, you know, well, that they can't basically go beyond what the amount of demolition they've been permitted, and so on. And if they do discover something unanticipated, that they need to come back to the building commissioner for, you know, or the planning department for to deal with that, to get that reviewed and approved and so on. But it's a legitimate concern. Not Mr. Oh, okay, just went down. Never mind.
Sorry.
Yeah, your hand was up again, Mr. Olson?
Yes, it is back up. Yeah, I just wanted to state that we really wanted to make it very clear what we're doing, because we are looking to, you know, to take that roof system out, and did not want to have any ambiguity with that, and nor delays while we've got the building under construction.
Right. When you say the roof system, I assume that means the roof itself and the supporting purlins, rafters, whatever.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And it sounded like if it was framed in the old-fashioned way with the, you know, that it would be reframed in a more, using more modern construction methods with, you know, whatever 2x8s or 2x10, whatever they are, running from ridge to eave, the way it's customarily done today.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Mark Sindro, did you have any questions or comments?
I may have missed it, but during the slideshow, I didn't see any neighborhood houses displaying a dormer such as the one that was depicted on the proposed plans. And I'm a little concerned that that does change the character of the house fairly significantly.
Are you talking about the dormer on the Elm Street side, which is a compliant dormer?
That is correct, yes.
Right.
Okay. By the way, are compliant dormers permitted to go all the way to the ridge? Start at the ridge like that one? I thought there was some.
It's dropped. I think again, I would have Jeffrey address that, but I think that is an optical illusion on that front facing elevation on the right-hand side. If you look at the one on the left-hand side, you see how it's dropped a little bit below the ridge, Mr. Chair?
Maybe it's some magnification is from.
I don't know. Jeffrey, do you want to answer that question?
It was It does look optically that it goes to the ridge on that right-hand side is not intended to be. I have a section that I think would show that in terms of the actual construction.
I say you don't happen to know offhand about how many, it's probably pretty close, but how many inches it might be below the actual ridge, existing ridge?
Let me see if I can pull that up.
Here, if I may,
Yes.
I had the same question when I was looking at these plans and went to look that up. And because I thought that there were guidelines saying that it needed to be some feet or inches below the existing ridge, but I was evidently remembering wrong. I couldn't find any mention of that. There's mentions of the setback for the front facing,
Right.
it lines up with the plane below it of the wall of the building. The sides, the setbacks from the sides, whether it's gable end or on the shed end, but there was no mention of how it meets the ridge.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because that's my recollection as well, Peter, that I know that there are setbacks for the, which I see, looks like they've been observed here on the wall that is in the same plane as that side of the house, and the two side walls set in quite a ways. Looks like they're considerably over the minimum requirement. But yeah, all that said, it does have definitely has an effect on the character, and of the house. There's no getting around that. But all right, did you have anything else, Mark, before we move on, and/or Peter, since you were just speaking?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, Mr. Carnwath, you're. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over Christopher Fay. Chris, did you have any questions or comments?
Just my usual, which it just seems to be very large addition to a relatively small house. So, on a very small street, a very tightly compacted neighborhood. I'm just afraid it's going to just like we've been talking for years now, overwhelm what's already there.
All right. Thanks. And as long as we're on size, it's interesting. I was puzzled by the comment that Attorney Mead made that it's the same footprint, but now when I look it over, I see how you've accomplished that. At the first floor, it looks like it is the same footprint, but then the second and third floor of the new addition are slightly bigger because they kind of go over that back door there, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, and Malcolm Carnwath, did you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm fine with it.
Okay. For myself, it is a neighborhood, no question, of very tightly spaced houses. So, there's a lot coverage issues. That's not the issue. That's not an issue that the Historical Commission is concerned with. We're looking at the historical values. There's my thoughts on that are, that the house, I'm not sure whether it was because of changes that have been made over the many years since it was first built or what, but it's other than its basic proportions, it's already changed quite a bit. It's not exactly what I would call, a gem of a historic house, but that's beside the point. I think Mr. Sendron's remarks are correct that, both of these they definitely change the character a bit. The one thing I'd like to see really is affects the ridge line. And I'd love for Mr. Alsop to comment if it wouldn't be possible, possibly by a slight alteration in the roof pitch or something. As you can see, the original house does have a shallower pitch already anyway, to just make the ridge line of both the dormer and the addition not go all the way up to the ridgeline of the original house, so that you could still see that original shape and proportion. It wouldn't be kind of buried in there. Any comment on that, Mr. Alsop?
That would pose some interesting framing issues, because when
Oh,
we,
I see.
yeah, when you have that cruciform, well, it's not cruciform, but if you have, when
Yeah,
you
I
have,
know what you mean.
when you have the T,
Right.
it's we're relying on that joint where the ridges meet. So dropping dropping the ridge on the
Dormer.
vertical addition would create some
Right.
significant framing issues.
Okay. That's too bad. Okay. All right. Any other comments? If not, we should take a vote as to whether we feel that the plan that's before us and can be approved as not having an undue deleterious effect on the historical value of the property and its environs, its immediate neighborhood. So that would be a motion to approve these current plans as presented. And if you, a yes vote on that would remove the demolition delay and permit the building permit to be issued, and no vote would mean that the demolition delay would continue in effect, and the applicant would be allowed to consider some of the comments that have been made by various commissioners here to see if they could make some alterations that might address some of those. So would someone like care to make that motion to regarding these plans?
I'll move. I'll make that motion.
Okay, that sounded like Malcolm.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it. This is Peter.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Okay, your vote, Mr. Conwath.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mark Sandrone.
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Christopher Fay.
No.
Okay, Mr. Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan.
No.
And the chair. At this point, I guess I have to vote no, because I would really love to see some of those changes that have been talked about. Even let's see, so we have 2 yes votes, 1, 2, 3, 4 no votes by my count. So the motion fails. What we typically do at this point is, and I know that the architect and the applicant would be very interested to hear if there's one or some specific guidance or advice we could provide them that would help them come back in the near future with something that the commission would be more inclined to approve. I know I pretty much have already said mine. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, Mark Sandron, I'd certainly be a lot more inclined to consider the plans if the dormer was removed.
Okay.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair, just to press on that a little bit, Mr. Sandrone? If the dormer were more shallow, I'm going to call it, for the lack of a proper architectural term, like I refer to as more as a peekaboo dormer, like a more shallow dormer that still gets some headroom up there that the applicant might need, but is not as exposed. Does that change your opinion at all about the total removal of it?
Well, let me ask you a question. The purpose of the dormer is to increase the square footage and the living space, or is it to improve the light entering into that space that is created there?
I'm gonna ask the architect to answer that, but I suspect it's a little bit of both. Jeff?
Yes, it is a little bit of both. That location is in the floor plan is set up for the bathroom on the 3rd floor. So that's the primary purpose of the dormer.
Well, my personal thing is that the dormer really changes the whole character of the house quite significantly. And therefore, even if it was a smaller, more recessed type of structure, I still think that it would modify the building in such a way that it really doesn't conform to other buildings of that nature in the neighborhood, because I don't see any other photos of buildings, and I will go visit that area, but I don't see any buildings with dormers of that nature.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Senderon. I appreciate it.
Any other commissioner have any other advice or comment for the applicant? Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate your bearing with us. Mr. Buchan, Attorney Mead, Jeffrey Alsop, and I missed the other name.
Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, so we need a little bit more help here because there were several votes against it. I heard your comments, obviously. Thank you. I heard Mr. Senderon's comments. Mr. McNamee, could you provide some further feedback on your position? Or did you vote in favor of it, I might add? Probably, you voted in favor of it, so thank you. I guess it would be Mr. Fay. Mr. Fay, yours was size. Is that correct, or is it related
Yes.
to the okay? And Mr. Morgan, are you voting related to it because of your issue or concern about the engineering? Because earlier you had commented that you thought the design was fine, and were actually pretty impressed at what was fit inside of it. So is it related to your concern about the structure?
Yes, that's correct. I am concerned that because it's an older building, it does have deficiencies. To work structurally and to renovate and alter the third floor is going to have impact on the lower floors, as well as redistribution of loads at the foundation, along with any redesign of general gravity and lateral loads that the engineer may want to add to the structure. And I believe that to have an accurate and fair and assessment of that right now for the Historical Commission, it would be good to know what those impacts are going to be. Because in fact, it may turn out that after seeing that report, that preservation report from a structural engineer, that the building actually may not be capable of handling the proposed changes. That's my concern.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was all helpful.
Okay, you're quite welcome. We try to be helpful when we can.
So can we continue this to your, it's my understanding you may not be having meetings in November. Can we continue this to your next meeting, whenever it may be?
Yeah, that's a good, I meant to ask Caitlin about that. There is one on the calendar for, I believe it's December 11th. Caitlin, is it true that I know the second meeting that would normally be held is Thanksgiving Day, so I understand that not being scheduled. Is there any reason why there was no meeting at all scheduled in November, Caitlin?
I believe the first meeting in November falls on Veterans Day, and then the second falls on Thanksgiving. So the next meeting we have on the calendars is December 9th.
Okay.
So we'd request, we'd like to appear back before the board commission on December 9th, if that's possible, please.
Yeah. Yes. Hang on a second. December. Make a note of that. 9. That's the second Thursday. Yes, well, the where this stands, believe that the let me consult my my flow chart here to see if yeah, it was already, since it was the motion that it was preferably preserved was passed, you know, the plans were not approved, so there's no sort of open question right now. So you're welcome to come back to, you know, I don't think legally, technically it requires a quote continuance, but we know we're happy to carry this forward. You can come back to any, you know, as soon as you're ready with revised plans, you're welcome to come back without any adverse prejudice or anything else.
Great. We'll see you on the 9th. Thank
Glenn,
you.
this is
Yeah.
Caitlin.
Yeah.
Can you clarify, did you impose a demo delay on this project?
Yes, when we voted,
Okay, you did that. Okay.
checking with the flow chart, we did it in one vote. We kind of, so we distorted the thing a little bit. Instead of taking one vote that's historically significant and considered for preservation, we went right to preferably preserved was the motion. And that was approved. So it was considered, quote, preferably preserved.
Hey, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Of the chair.
Who was that speaking?
It's Jeff.
Jeffrey. Yes, go ahead.
Hi again. So I just wanted to have, if I could have you reiterate what your thoughts were. You were mentioning the ridge heights.
Yeah, well, two things. They're basically two things. I think I agree with Mr. Sandrone about the dormer on that side. It's kind of the well, is it more visible? Kind of more visible in that neighborhood because it affects both the Elm Street view and the Plum Street view. That the dormer it is a kind of a character change that just doesn't, and no one really mentioned that stovepipe. That's we won't go there, but it just is a character change. It just looks odd. Maybe. I know, and the fact that that creating that L, you'll note that most of the examples you've shown, I don't know, I'm of two minds that the additions are, let's face it, a lot of them were awkward. A lot of them were, just. And a lot of these later added additions where people, added on because the original house, let's say, had no indoor plumbing or whatever, are, this is probably better design than most of those. I think I come back to the guideline about, the having some differentiation between the original historical structure and the addition. And where the ridge lines match up, it looks more like it was, either built at the same time or trying to look like it was built at the same time, so that you don't have that differentiation that it is recommended when you're putting an addition on a historic structure. So yeah, so that's my biggest objection, I guess. As far as, I think as far as overall size, it's not really, it's kind of an upward extension. But I'm familiar with that neighborhood, looked around it. I think that the comments made, by the applicant and through, you and the attorney and everybody else, I think we all recognize that just about all those lots are very, very thickly or densely packed. And I don't think that the size to me doesn't rise to the standard of being overly detrimental. It's really more what it's doing to the outline, the shape, the overall impact of the historic structure. I don't know, I kind of rambled there a little bit. I hope that was somewhat helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we have a busy agenda items list. The busy agenda. So let's go to the next one. I think well, might as well just leave Attorney Mead unmuted because I know she'll be speaking again. The next item on the agenda is 22-24 Olive Street. This is a property that we first heard a while back. It's the applicant is trying to get a set of plans approved that will lift the demolition delay. So I'll turn the floor over to you, Attorney Mead, to discuss what changes have been made since we last got together.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the record, Lisa Mead, Teller and Acosta, 30 Green Street, on behalf of the 22-24 Olive Street LLC, John Sarkis, the manager, who's with me here this evening, and Ernie DeMaio, who is the architect from Tectonics Architects. Next slide, please, Caitlin. So as you did recall at the last meeting, we pretty much have narrowed it down, we hope, to one issue that Mr. McNamee had brought up related to the doors on the what we're calling the hyphen, which was referred to as the connector. And the reason we're calling it the hyphen is because that's actually how the Secretary of the Interior standard publications refer to these connections when you are differentiating the new from the old. And so one of the questions related to the length of the hyphen and then the doors and windows in the hyphen, and they're actually related, as you probably know, and we indicated at the last meeting. And that is that if you're going to remove one of the exterior doors, then those two exterior doors need to be made inside through shared space, which of course requires a certain amount of clearance. But that having been said, Ernie and John were able to work that out. And so what we're about to show you does put up one door. We also remove one window on the Russia Street side of the hyphen, and it was reduced by a foot. And so it was reduced in length, which then of course reduced the overall lot coverage. Next slide, please. The other thing we show on our plans, and the chair had asked this question at the last meeting, so it was added to the plans, is the chimney in the new addition was added to the east elevation. That is the elevation that you look at the house from Olive Street. So you'll be able to see the relationship between the chimney and the Olive Street elevation of the house. And then the final thing, there was a couple of questions again, and of course, because of the reduction in the size of the hyphen, the question about the square footage overall. So the total new construction is 1,984 square feet, but we are removing 493 square feet from the existing floor area. And so the net new on the project is 1,491 square feet on a lot, which is 10,758 square feet. Next slide, please. And so I'm not going to go through these standards right now. I am going to talk about them in a minute. But what we wanted to do, and what Ernie prepared, and we will show you momentarily, is actually how, quite frankly, right on point, this proposal meets the Secretary of the Interior standards from a number of ways. And in fact, we've taken a photo and a sketch out of one of their publications that show exactly how these connections are made onto existing homes, which then allow for all of the things that you're supposed to do: subordination of the existing structure, excuse me, of the proposed structure to the existing structure. And in this instance, you know, the addition is shorter than the original structure by 7 feet 6 inches. And the hyphen and 4 feet 4 inches at the main addition ridge, and also narrow and smaller in square footage. It could be removed in the future and wouldn't impair the essential and form integrity of the existing structure. The removal of those later added additions expose more of the original structure, and we're able to restore some of the original windows. The new addition is visually separate from the original structure. The hyphen connector is proposed to connect the addition mass to the existing building. And as Ernie's going to show you in a minute there, it's specifically cited in the Secretary of the Interior standards through graphics and other documentation. So we believe that we fully have met the Secretary of the Interior standards with this proposal. Next slide, please. So at the last meeting, we also did not have a site plan, and afterwards thought, well, you know, in order to show the relationship kind of from a bird's eye view of the proposed addition to the existing structure, and help actually show how it is subordinate in square footage and separate and apart from the existing structure, that of course the site plan would be important. And so we've added the site plan to the presentation this evening. Next slide, please. I might add on that site plan, which we don't have to go back to, but it does show that even under existing conditions, the proposed conditions have less lot coverage than the existing conditions, which also goes to the amount of building under roof on the lot. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ernie to talk about the changes he made relative to the elevations.
Good evening. Thank you, Lisa. Here we're looking at the upper elevation is the south elevation facing Russia Street, and the elevation down below is the Olive Street elevation. While we're on Olive Street, you can see the chimney of the addition in the very background. It's actually about 82 feet back from the Olive Street facade. So one would never actually see the chimney from this vantage point if you were walking on Olive Street, but that does depict to you what the relative height of the new chimney is relative to the existing structure. Along Russia Street in the south elevation, you can see how the connector has been modified. We have decreased the east-west length of the hyphen by a foot. We've actually done so at the expense of some of the interior unit spaces. We've created a common space in the interior to allow one of the doors to be removed per the commission's comments from the last meeting. We centered a window above that door on the second floor and removed a window from the hyphen as well to bring order to that facade. And we've reduced the length of the hyphen to the greatest degree that we believe we can and still meet all applicable codes and clearances in the interior of the building. Next slide, please. I'm going to come back to this slide, actually. I think I'm going to pass down to the next slide and look at slide number 8, just so that we can take an overall view of the project. We removed a window on the Russia Street side of the hyphen, but on the north elevation, which is the upper elevation, both doors remain and a single window remains. The doors allow either unit to enter the yard space from their units. So the double doors on the non-street facing side of the building remain. We didn't, quite frankly, have enough room to eliminate a door on this side and create more interior common space. So we've allowed each unit to access the yard space on the yard, and this facade is not, this portion of the facade is not visible from any public vantage point. One additional change that we made based on comments that we've heard in previous meetings is we revised the window just to the right of the hyphen to be the same size on the first floor, the same size as the window immediately to the right of it. Although we could not vertically align these windows with the second floor windows, we believe we've addressed as well as we can with the current floor plan, arranging that facade in a way that is more orderly, less varied than it has been. I know there were comments about size and variety of windows, and we think we've done a lot to calm that down to some degree, and by simplifying the number of window types that we have. In the west elevation at the bottom of the sheet, again, these changes were for our previous meeting, but I'll just reiterate. We reorganized the interiors of the building to allow the 4 windows on the west facade at the furthest end of the addition to be aligned with each other, both vertically and horizontally. We reproportioned the size of the chimney and relocated the windows such that the mass of the new chimney would stack over brick facade below. So I believe that each one of the comments that has been rendered by the commission, that we have addressed those hopefully successfully. But we have been attempting to be responsive to each and every comment that the commission has made.
Sorry, pardon the interruption. On this west elevation, the two windows on the right-hand side there shown as like 1/1. I assume that's just a fault in the drawing.
I believe that's correct. Those are existing windows in the existing building, or let's say restored windows in the existing building. The one above on the second floor is an existing window. The one below is a window opening that was original to the building, but covered by the previous one-story addition that we would be re-exposing and restoring. And yes, we would match the window mullion patterns in those windows with the rest of the building.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. I'd like to go back to the previous slide, if we would, and talk a little bit about the physical expression of the addition and how it relates to specific criteria within the Secretary of Interior documents. I think it's very important to review those because we did take great effort to try to be responsive to those criteria. Beginning at the upper left-hand corner of the document, there's a statement about the compatibility of the addition with the existing building. And primary to that is the highlighted statement that says inherent in all of the guidance is the concept that the addition needs to be subordinate to the historic building. And by subordinate, the criteria defines the height of the building, the footprint of the addition, the materials. The language is attempting to have the addition not be the showpiece for the project, to have the original building be the showpiece and have the addition be subordinate to it. Additionally, in the box below, where we continue to quote from the Secretary of the Interior guidelines, it says that separating the addition from the historic addition with a small hyphen can reduce the impact of the addition. Additionally, it goes on to say that setting the addition back from the mass of the historic addition was also desirable. In our case, we've done all three of those things. We've included a hyphen to separate the addition from the original building and distinguish it from the original building. We have also set back both the hyphen from the Russia Street facade of the original building, and we've set back both addition facades in the main body of the addition from the Russia Street facade. So the existing Russia Street facade is proud of all three surfaces that we're proposing, and obviously in scale, we're shorter than the existing building. Our eave lines are lower. We're subordinate in every way that can be defined. Up on the upper right-hand corner, the guidelines refer to differentiating the new addition from the historic addition, and I've highlighted several points that were important to our design. The first one being that a new addition must be visually distinguishable from the historic building. And we've attempted to do that with the use of the hyphen and also the massing of the body of the addition. Further commentary goes on to say, avoiding any approaches that unify the two volumes into a single architectural whole. The historic building must be clearly identifiable and its physical integrity must not be compromised by the new addition. So the concept of not unifying the two volumes together is a specific criteria that the Secretary of the Interior cites. And we've attempted to do that with the use of a hyphen. Below our proposed addition, there are graphic examples from the Secretary of the Interior that show what they propose as preferable solutions to that process. You can see the photograph in the lower left corner of that diagram shows a hyphen being added to an existing historic building, and then the body, the mass of that addition added to the hyphen. We frankly believe that we've done the guidelines one better because the hyphen that's added in the example that they cite as preferable, their roof overlays the historic roof. In our case, we actually dropped the floor elevations of the hyphen to the extent that our new roof could actually tuck underneath the existing historic roof and not cover that roof and not cover the chimney. So if the goal, if the desire is to cover as little of the existing building as possible and to highlight the original structure as much as possible, we believe we've done the guidelines one better with our addition. And you can see on the comments on the left from the Secretary of the Interior guidelines, it clearly states incorporating a simple recessed small scale hyphen to physically separate the old and the new volumes, or setting the addition back from the wall planes of the historic building, which we've done all of that. And there was quite a bit of commentary in the last presentation that we did that this approach appears visually to create the appearance of two masses separated by a hyphen, a connector, which is precisely what the guidelines say is a desirable outcome. And I know some objection in the comments from our last meeting was that a project that uses this approach as a design solution was one that might not be considered favorable by the commission. We would encourage the commission to rethink that position, because we think we've actually not only met the spirit of the criteria, but we've actually gone one better in some cases. I would ask to move on to the materials portion, which is 2 slides from where we were. Okay, in the exterior specifications, which we've attached, we have memorialized the commentary that has taken place to this point with the project. There are no changes or no new criteria that are being added here, no new specifications. This is really just summarizing everything that we've discussed in our prior presentations with you for both the existing building and the addition. We can review any of this or answer any questions that you might have. We've attached this in advance, so hopefully everyone's had a chance to look through it all, and we'll provide any commentary that goes along with it. I guess I would turn this back to Lisa at this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernie. And just to remind the commission, previously all of these specifications were on the plans, but because of the tight turnaround, we just wanted to make sure you had a list in your possession. So I want to show the commission one other thing before we turn it over. There's been a lot of discussion, and this whole application has kind of come full circle, because when I think we actually first met in July, and maybe even the 1st of August, and then we had a site visit. And at the site visit, we were pointing out essentially the size of the lot, which is if this is a single family home, is a fully conforming lot, and actually one of the largest lots in the area. And so the applicant, by submitting himself to this process, has chosen to work with the commission in coming up with an appropriate modification to the existing 2-family structure. And that's fine. And obviously the applicant has put a lot of time and money, and Ernie has put a lot of expertise into designing this addition to allow this to continue to be a 2-family home. However, I think it's important to know that there are always other options. And I want to just show you something. I'm not showing this to you to make a threat or anything of that, but I think it's important that, you know, everybody goes through design processes and makes decisions about how they want to move forward. And John and Ernie made a decision to move forward in the manner in which we have moved forward. However, if you go to the next slide, please, Caitlin, John could decide, or could have decided, that he would just turn this whole thing into a single family home, and he would not need any special relief whatsoever and could pull a building permit. And this is the possible single family home from the north elevation. It has an addition on the back. In a minute, I'll show you how it retains a portion of it retains the historic roof line of the shed dormer in the back, or shed addition in the back. That is the historic part of the addition. It adds an attached 2-car garage with a room over. Certainly not as attractive to, we think, as the proposed 2-family, but certainly there is a market for a large single-family home in this area of the city with a 2-car garage attached to the house. It would not be a hard sell to just about anybody coming into the city. Next slide, please. And just to give you an idea, that's what it looks like overhead. So obviously the plan on the top is the plan that we have before you. The plan on the bottom would be the by right plan. It has a nice yard along Russia Street and Olive Street. You see the older addition, which is retained and not removed, and therefore we don't trigger any review by the board. And then the additions are added and they're all compliant. And then there's a driveway added with an entry into the garage in the back. So not the choice of my client. If it was the choice of my client, he wouldn't have spent the time and money to come into the commission over the last 4 months. But these are the design decisions and decisions that people look at when they try to decide how to move forward. And we certainly think from a historic aspect and the reuse of this property, that what has been proposed and presented this evening to you and over the last couple of months is certainly the preferable way to go. And I just
Lisa,
thought,
can I add a few things, Lisa?
sure.
Yeah. You know, when you begin a project, we look at all sorts of alternatives. And early on in the project, the team tried to consider, well, what options might be available to us as of right, because we understand that altering a historic building can be challenging, and we like to understand what the hurdles might be. And, you know, we come up with different alternatives for our client to review and to understand all the different aspects that weigh on a project. This was one of the alternatives that was discussed at the time. I think there was a strong desire on the design team's part and the ownership part to try to continue the use of the project as a 2-family as it is. But there is also an understanding that given today's market and given the goals of my client, that the existing building, trying to reserve and retain as much of the original building as possible, would create a condition where we would virtually have to gut the interior of the historic building. Although it's not necessarily part of this board's purview, there were great efforts made by the project team to preserve as much of the original building as possible, both on the interior and the exterior. We have made the connection to our addition as narrow as possible. In fact, we've exposed about 20% or 25% more of the original facade than is currently exposed on the exterior. But on the interior, which we don't really talk about much in these meetings, an addition of this sort, as we're proposing in the upper site plan, allows a large majority of the interior to remain the historic elements that exist. Because of the way that building was built as a timber frame building, with all the beautiful finishes that we have in the interior and the grand central stair and all of these items, we wanted to retain as much of the original building as possible. But because of the way the building is built and because of codes and market forces and so many variety of reasons, which I'm sure everyone on this commission is familiar, to move in a direction where we did not have an addition or a substantial addition to the project would require us to substantially gut the interior of the existing building. We believe that to be a no-win situation for people who actually care about historic buildings. And, you know, we care about historic interiors as much as we care about historic exteriors. And in a sense, the proposal that's before you and has been before you represents the best opportunity for maximum preservation of the original building. We are preserving as much of the original exterior. We're restoring much of the original exterior, and we're preserving almost entirely the historic elements of the interior that have historic value. And we would much rather proceed with that approach. In doing so, knowing that we would be putting an addition on the building to achieve a successful two-family for this site, we did our best to set back the addition as far as we could from our neighbors, from our lot lines. We did our best to minimize the size of the footprint. We did our best to not affect the existing facade in a negative way. You know, we have to balance all of these issues and all the economic issues, all the market issues, all the permitting issues. You know, there are many factors that go into this decision. I can say that although oftentimes developers are often greeted with cynicism, I think it would have been a lot easier for this development team to take an approach of, we're going to do the easiest thing for us to do here, and we're just going to put a big addition on this building and avoid having to have these type of public discussions. We're just going to take the path of least resistance.
Okay. I don't mean to cut you off here, but for the sake of time, I think we get the message. Can you wrap up quickly?
Yeah. So, you know, I think we've shown good faith in that regard. We have come to every meeting with changes that have been encouraged by the commission and by the abutters. We have done the best we can to keep the scale of the project down and increasingly reduce it. It may not be the project that some folks might want it to be, but we believe we've operated in good faith and met the spirit of the guidelines that apply. And that's the end of what I would say there.
Okay, thank you very much. Caitlin, can you go back to slide 9, please? That way we won't have to look at that any longer. I assume your presentation is complete, Attorney Mead?
Yes, I think Ernie did a fine job wrapping it up.
Yes. All right. I only had one quick question and it's on this page we're looking at on the specs. The windows, it says existing windows to remain, fine. New windows shall match existing as nearly as practical. I wonder if you could just, do you know what the detail is going to be on that? You know how we are about windows. When you say match existing, I mean, what does that mean exactly?
Well, the windows of the existing structure are actually vinyl windows. There are vinyl windows on the interior and vinyl windows on the exterior. The lights of the windows are simulated divided lights. So the windows of the existing are grills between the glass. And so they are obviously not original to the building, and when they were replaced, we don't know, but we're not proposing to alter them. We're proposing that any windows that we insert into the facade as closely match the windows that are there.
Yes.
And the windows in the new building, Ernie, will be what?
Simulated divided lights. So we would like to get some additional shadow on the exterior. And were we renovating the original building back in the day, whenever those windows were replaced, we might have moved towards something that had more shadow. But the windows that are there are in good condition and they all operate well. And everyone seems to enjoy the look of the building. And so we're going to retain those windows.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question. Let me
Yep.
turn quickly to my colleagues on the panel here. Does anyone have a question, comment, or clarification? Or I could go around the way we usually do.
Yeah. I have something to say.
Sure, go ahead, Malcolm. Is that you, Malcolm?
Yeah, I'm generally against all these projects that look like infill, but I think these people have jumped through enough hoops, and I think they've come up with a really good plan, and I think it's admirable, and I think we should endorse it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? I see a hand raised by Joe Morgan.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. I first of all like to thank Ernie, the architect, for walking us through, reminding the commission of what the issues are relative to the existing building from a preservation standpoint and from the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines, because we do forget those, we lose sight of them, I think, in some of our critique. So thank you for that. I think they're all spot on. And I agree with all of your narrative there. If you had stopped there, I'd have nothing more to say. Unfortunately, you presented an alternative design, and I do have to say that I prefer the design that you presented, and I think there are many others that might have actually been nicer than the one that you've actually proposed. I'm not here to discuss all of that now because I do believe you're correct that we have to respect the criteria that are given to us for additions by the Secretary of the Interior. But if you're saying that you have reduced the quality of your creativity and your design because of those, I think that's really a shame. However, I still have no further comments on your design. That's your design. The last thing I'd like to say is if the driveway that you propose in that design really can be extended back further from Olive Street in order to accommodate your new addition, can that still be used in the design that you are actually proposing? And it would go a long way, I think, to addressing comments that we've heard on the last two sessions from people living on Olive Street who's saying that cars parked along Olive Street are going to be really unattractive. Those aprons there are going to spoil the landscaped area on that edge. And I believe you've given us a solution here, or a possible solution to fix that. Anyway, I would still vote for the project, but I do have those additional comments. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I see Christopher Fay, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where to start. I guess, and I just want to make a statement. I am not interested in a further discussion, a rebuttal, anything of that matter. But it is, because we are oftentimes told what our purview is and what our purview isn't, and now we've been told it's not our purview, but we like to tell you what we might want to do with the house just in case. So I see our role as being responsible, because we don't have any money invested in this game. We're here as a voluntary group. We're not developers, we're not attorneys, we're not architects. We're not making any money off of this. And so I would dare say that our obligation is, I'll call it a moral obligation, as I've said many times, to the home, regardless of who the owner is, because, you know, at the risk of sounding crazy, we don't really own these homes. These homes are owned by the city in a sense. They've been here far longer than we have, And as Malcolm oftentimes reminds us, they'll be here probably likely far longer after we're gone. So I just want to make that statement because I think we also have a moral obligation to the neighborhood and to some degree the neighbors. I'm not looking for discussion. That's just my point of view on this. And I just got through hearing about this isn't a threat, but this is what we could do, but we're not going to do it, but we could do it. So I guess in some ways I would say, go ahead and do it. Because I don't think they want this to be a single family home. I think that's all clear to everybody what the role and the goal here is. And I guess the last thing I would say is maybe we need to just move this along to the next step and the next level and let the next commission or board make the ultimate decision, since it's not ultimately our decision to make. So I think we need to take a vote, and while I'm a no, I guess I would hope that it's a yes, so that we can just move it on and the neighbors can have their say at the next sort of level. It's clear that the neighborhood's not in favor of this, and neither am I. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Mr. Sandron, Mark?
Yeah, I totally echo what Mr. Fay just said. But that being said, this is a little detail, but I am totally confused about how the hyphen work with one door in front and two doors in the back. It is unclear to me what the floor plan is to justify that construct there. And while I totally agree that this may fit the criteria, from a purely architectural standpoint, I'm still trying to figure that out, and I'd like some clarification on that.
If I might, Mr. Sandron, there is a common vestibule created on Russia Street. So the single door opens up into a common foyer, and the common foyer has a door to the left and a door to the right. And when you enter to the left, you enter into the addition. When you enter to the right, you enter into a mudroom that is attached to the historic original building. The floor plan of the first floor is split down the middle from Russia Street towards what you might consider the side yard or the backyard. And that demising wall has a door on either side of it on the opposite elevation from the south elevation, on the north elevation. So it's almost a T-shaped space in floor plan, entered into a single door on Russia and split into two spaces, left and right, on the opposite facade, where a door from either unit can access the backyard. And to address the comment of Mr. Morgan, the reason we didn't extend a driveway from Olive Street on this plan is because, quite honestly, there is a significant amount of yard space that will remain in this project, which we see as an amenity for both of the units to be able to share outdoor space or to divide it between the two units. And so we wanted to limit the amount of paving that we added to the site along that side. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Sanders.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Peter, any comments or questions? Peter McNamee?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate Joe Morgan's comments and Chris Fay's comments more than I can say. I think it is amusing to see the example sort of surpass the application. But Chris Fay's point about if you want to do this as a single family, go ahead and do it, irrespective of what you've shown us, if that's by right. It's exactly the same thing that I thought when looking at this. I don't think that that's what they're after either. You know, it doesn't monetize quite the same way, but that's not any of our business. Having said all of that, they've been sensitive and responsive to the standards. They've responded to what we've put in front of them. I don't like infill either, but they do have the space to build this. And there comes a time, I think, when we have to cooperate with a cooperating application. So I would be a yes vote on moving this forward, because I think we've pushed it as far as it can go. And I think this is an acceptable design.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Was that you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. And in fact, your last comment there is pretty much sums up my feeling on it as well. I think that the architect, the applicant, they have done a good job. And the one area that in fact, Caitlin, could you go to 7? I do appreciate it. So I always had to chuckle. It's like really hitting all the points here, and that was very effective. The one thing that, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, the addition is so imitative of the other house. You see here in the example shown in the Secretary of Interior standards, the addition mimics the connector more than the original house. So, but but it's kind of a shade of gray. I think that there's enough differentiation in all the other ways that they've designed the addition, and especially if they do as planned with and have a different surface finishes, the plain brick versus painted brick and so on. I don't think anyone will be confused as to that this is an addition and that's the original house and so on. But that was my only design real critique there. I'm also, Chris and others have made good and very relevant comments about, in addition to these standards that you've quoted here, the Secretary of Interior does also talk about, and the ordinance that we are chartered to uphold does talk about the neighborhood and the neighborhood context and so on. So, we can't ignore that. And I did wrestle with that one. I have to admit, I walked back there again. In fact, ran into a local resident. We talked a little bit about it. It's kind of an unusual spot. Olive Street is very dense. It has, very little space between houses. It has some, an unusual multi attached building pretty much across the street. But down Russia Street, it's a different flavor, a little bit different feel, partly because of good, reasonably sized lots that just happen to have small houses on them, and other lots where the house is on the other side of the lot on, I don't know if it's Congress or one of the other streets there. I think it's Congress. So, it has a more of an open feel. So I understand, that context, but given everything, especially when you look at the overall plan, like that, the new plan that they provided for this meeting, you can see there is still a considerable amount of open space given what the neighborhood is like. So I just couldn't see holding this up and saying no based on that, on the size consideration either. Although I will remind any attendees who are still concerned about that they will have an opportunity to voice those concerns to the ZBA. I believe this project will be going before them. So yeah, so I would have a hard time holding it up at this point either. So given that, I think everyone has spoken here on the panel. I don't think we need another public comment period, frankly, and it's getting late. So is there someone who is prepared to make a motion that the plans as presented tonight be approved?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, that sounded like Malcolm, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Seconded. This is Joe.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay, so we'll go around. Malcolm Conrath, your vote on that?
Vote to approve.
Okay, thank you. That's a yes. Mark Sindron?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it sounded a lot like Malcolm again. Mark, I didn't, oh, there you go.
I'm a no on this.
You're a no. Okay, thank you. Christopher Fay?
I'm a no as well.
Okay. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Okay. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair, as I just indicated, is voting yes on that. That makes 4 yays, 2 nays, 4 being the required quorum to pass any motion. The motion is approved, and the project can go forward. Well, it's getting late, so I'll say no more on that.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Yeah, thank you. And just one quick comment. I do appreciate all the effort that the architects and the applicant went through to be responsive to our critiques and so forth. That was, we do appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's see here. Give me a second. Okay, the next one, I believe Miss Mead or Ms. Mead, you are involved in this one as well. This is a DCOD/DOD advisory review, or at least seems to be. I'll get back to that in a minute. This is 17-21 State Street, known to most of us as the Fowles newsstand storefront, now occupied by Brine Restaurant. They were before this board a while. Well, my recollection, and I'm a little hazy on this one, we did a sort of, I don't think we did any formal review of this, but I know there were some comments that members of the commission made to the ZBA when they looked at this. So I'm going to do I will let you present this, Attorney Mead, in just a moment. I just want to do a very, very brief review of the history of this so that everyone, both on my board and anyone else listening, understands the history. So I'll go through this quickly. Back on March 18th, or a memo dated March 18th of this year, there was the applicant filed an appeal that the zoning administrator's determination that a special permit from the planning board would be needed to change the operation of the windows was, quote, in error. And they asked the ZBA to overturn that decision. That appeal was taken up by the ZBA on May 11th of this year, and but it became clear that the ZBA was not inclined to contradict the ordinance itself, but they suggested perhaps a request for a variance application would be taken up. So on June 8th, the applicant went before the ZBA with a request for a variance to have operable windows. Now, as a side note here, at the time, the demolition overlay district ordinance forbade changes in the operability of windows. That has now been changed. So even under the DOD, currently, if there was a new project to be undertaken, there are other window constraints, but simply the mere operability function itself would not require a special permit. Anyway, so so on June 8th, the ZBA did give them the variance with some conditions, specifically that the variance was only to allow operable storefront windows, where the DOD currently prohibited that. The important condition was that, and I'm quoting here from the decision, final window, at least from the minutes, final window design details, for example, materials, size, shape, etc., shall be subject to further review and approval by the planning board, as said board would typically have and retain oversight of such details when acting as the special permit granting authority within the DOD where historical windows are proposed to be replaced. And finally, there was another condition that doesn't really apply to what we're working on today, but it was saying that this variance doesn't grant any other relief that would apply to anything else that's talking about, like the historical signage and so on. So those are the conditions. So then on October 12th, the ZBA, the appeal was still kind of hanging out there, appeal of the administrator's decision that said that they needed to, this DOD follow the DOD process. They were still appealing that. That got continued to November 23rd. The ZBA was still kind of, seemed displeased with that, but we're not going to get into the appeal of that decision. That's not our purview, and it's not relevant to tonight's discussion per se. But I did want to go over this history, mainly because I did have a question that I'd like Attorney Mead to address. In your memo for this meeting, Attorney Mead, you cited section 27F. That's the procedure in the DoD for these reviews. That as to why you're requesting this advisory review. So you appear to be following the DoD ordinance, but on the other hand, that ordinance is still being challenged, by this applicant. So would I be correct to assume that you're following the procedure, but it's strictly as a result of the condition of the variance from the ZBA? Is that the way to understand this?
Not entirely, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
But thank you for that review. And just for the record, Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa, 30 Green Street, on behalf of the applicant Caswell Restaurant Group, who's here with me this evening, as well as the architect on the project, Dan Riccarelli, sorry. So you might recall, because I think I don't know, I presume you were at the ZBA meeting, I'm not positive, that the applicant told the ZBA at that meeting that they were happy to come to the Historic Commission as well as the Planning Board under the DoD process for the review of the windows generally, just not the operability of them. And so the applicant agreed to the condition that the ZBA put in fact, offered the condition that the ZBA put in to their decision. The appeal of the building inspectors or the zoning code enforcement officer's determination is separate. And we will talk to the ZBA about that. But in fact, by the ZBA not making a decision, it prevents any appeal of that. So in the meantime, the goal is to get the permits so that we can put the windows in. The legality of the machinations around those applications, quite frankly, not relevant to this particular application. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I had some personal issues going on, so I was not able to attend the most recent meeting. I think that's the one you're referring to just now. So
No,
I did not hear that.
No, I was referring to the when we were in front of the zoning board in the dates that you read for the variance. As part of the discussion with the ZBA relative to the variance, the applicant said at that meeting that they would come to the Historic Commission and then to the Planning Board under the DoD for the window design, et cetera, which you read very clearly, right? So it was, they said that right out front at those meetings.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, and yeah, and just so we're clear, I totally agree. We're not, any issues of the legality of the DoD or the appeal or anything is not on the table for discussion at this meeting or even before this board. So yeah, that's not my concern at all at this point. I just wanted to better understand the context of this, and I think you have answered that question. So in essence, we are following for this design review and the advisory review process, the process that is outlined in the ordinance, and it's about the changes to the storefront and so on. All right. Did you want to?
And I would argue, yeah, and I think, well, I'm going to get into this. I would argue that it isn't the purview of the Historic Commission to do, quote, design review. That's not the purview under the DoD. The purview under the DoD is very clear. You are supposed to provide an advisory opinion to the zoning board, to the planning board relative to the significance of the historic building or structure proposed for demolition and the relative importance of such historic building or structure and its setting within the DoD.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I the way I phrased that gave that impression. I didn't mean to imply that we had a design review function. Sorry. Okay.
That's all right. Would you like me to start talking about the
why don't you? Yes, you have the floor.
So this property is, as everybody knows, is at 17 to 21 State Street. The chair did recall that, in fact, you all had talked about, the commission had talked about the potential, the frontage, if you will, or the front storefront of this, but there was no application in front of it. The commission, I hadn't even been engaged yet, but the commission just on its own, having heard that maybe something was going to happen there, had a discussion about the storefront itself. So that's how you all had the discussion before. But we are here officially pursuant to the DoD review, as I said just a little bit ago, and the commission, as this commission is well aware, is charged with providing an advisory opinion relative to the significance of the building or structure proposed for demolition. In this instance, of course, the building isn't proposed for demolition, but the windows, the change of the windows is classified as a demolition under the DoD, and the relative importance of such historic building or structure to the setting within the DoD. Next slide, please. So the DoD in this building in particular is in the B2 zoning district. This building and the use is fully conforming to all dimensional requirements. The building itself is approximately 30 feet tall. The use is a restaurant use on the first floor and residences on the upper floors, and therefore it's considered mixed use. This is the Form B for the building. I'm sorry that the picture is sideways, but that's the way the Form B is, as many of you know. The structure was constructed in or around 1820. The building itself, of course, is listed as contributory on the district data sheets. Next slide, please. And then this is just the continuation of the Form B. So if you can go to the first picture. So there are not a lot of up close photos of this building in Market Square or up State Street. But so I thought for the contextual comments that were earlier provided, I would show some of the photographs we could, that the building exists in them, but obviously does not include a close-up. So this is an 1840 shot from Market Square. Next slide, please. And then we have another shot from 1840. It was a tough winter, apparently. Up State Street. Next slide, please. And then here we have another shot closer to Liberty Street, looking up State. Of course, Fowles would be on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. And then this is from Pleasant, looking down State. I just thought that one of the things I thought was fun about this picture is the little plank that goes across the gutter to the sidewalk from the street. I thought that was an interesting aspect of this photo. But anyway, the Fowles is down on the right-hand side, of course. Next slide, please. Again, this is a little better shot, but this is down State Street from Pleasant. Next slide, please. And here's one that's a little bit closer. Now, this is taken from the slide presentation, in fact, that this commission heard, presented by former member Pecknick. I'm not sure where she found this photo, but this is one of the better photos. And this is shortly after the windows were changed in the 1940s. So the existing windows, interestingly enough, are not original, of course, as you know, to the structure. They were added in the 1940s, which would make them less than 100 years old if this were under traditional review standards. But you can see the storefront windows in this photograph. Next slide, please. And then this is an article which was also included in Ms. Pecknick's review, and it was it was about how Fowles changed their windows in the 40s, and they were all excited to have a new storefront window. And as you may have heard Ms. Pecknick repeat in the past, and it has been said by a number of historians, of course, in the 1940s, cars were more popular. And so folks who had retail businesses wanted to have windows that provided more opportunity for people to see in them as folks drove by in their cars. Next slide, please. And again, here's a shot at Fowles down State Street during the holidays.
Is there any date on that one, Ms.
I don't have it. I don't have a date on that one. I don't. But, you know, obviously it's, I mean, you can see the cars, the traffic's going both ways. It's before the, obviously before the 70s. because all the light poles are still in the downtown. So I don't know, maybe the 50s, if you look at the cars.
Yeah, it's okay. I was just wondering.
Yep. Next
No.
slide, please.
Would be late 60s, according to
Late
Paul.
60s. Okay, well, there you go. And this, of course, is current day at the slides. And the next several slides are the current photographs of the storefront windows. Next slide, please. And so here, the application before you this evening, I think this is a good part to point this out. The application before you is to replace these storefront windows with operable windows that are what we call stacking in the same opening. And as Dan is going to talk to you about in a little bit, when you see the proposal, the bottom section of this, the bottom black section will stay. The top sign will be cleaned up, and brine, the proposal is to have brine painted on where the fouls is. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit because we engaged a preservationist to talk about these windows. The aluminum header will also stay, and then the new windows will go where the existing storefront windows are. They will be fixed as you go into the front door. So the two sides as you go into that entry will be fixed, but the ones on the street will be operable. Next slide, please. Again, here's another view of this. And next slide, please. I think this is also a good opportunity to say, you know, obviously the building was built in the 1800s and it served a purpose and it had different windows due to changing times. In that instance, changing economic times, the windows were changed. And here we have another change in the way our economy and retail and or storefronts are needed. And we're proposing another change in the window operation at this time. Next slide, please. And here's coming up State Street. And the next slide, please. And then another closer view coming up State Street. And the next slide, please. So here is the design of the windows. And I'm going to turn it over to Dan to talk about the specifics of the proposed design. And then I do want to point out to the commission, and I think that you all read this, we did engage Dr. Judith Selwyn of Preservation Technology Associates to do an inventory and review of the windows and the facade, this front facade. While it's not required under the ordinance for the Historic Commission review, because that's not the purpose of the Historic Commission review, it is required for the planning board. But I thought it was really helpful and certainly very interesting to have this commission understand what in fact these materials are, what the purpose is that they served, how they can be preserved and taken care of. And then, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan because he's going to tell you exactly what the proposal is to do with the windows.
Thank you, Lisa. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. Good evening, Jan Ricciarelli, Seeger Architects, Inc., 10 Derby Square in Salem, Mass. And as Lisa stated, we're working together with Dr. Judith Selwyn. She's our preservation technologist. And just briefly, I'll give a little bit of history. The building, again, like Lisa said, was constructed in 1820 after a disastrous fire, which occurred in 1811, in which the whole city block got constructed. In 1900, files opened. And in 1941, the Art Deco facade that you see today was added, again, to meet changing times and the introduction of the automobile. So the building itself is originally federal style, along with the whole block. And obviously, there's no work being done to the federal 2 stories up above. And there is an existing vitrolite, which is a glass incised panel in which the fowl's name was painted on, which is in need of repair. Our preservation technologist said that a little cleaning would go a long way to bringing it back to some of its original luster. So that is what we are planning to do. And then there is a galvanized cover, which is underneath that, which is probably a remnant of the old awning system, will remain. And is that line right there where the new archable window head will lie. So everything from the top of the building down to that galvanized panel is going to remain exactly the same and be restored. The glass will extend down to the base, which is again is a vitrolite panel. This is colored black, colored to look like a marble, a Carrara marble. Another restoration feature we'll be doing is that center column currently is clad in what appears to be a plastic laminate. It is not really an exterior material. That'll be removed, and black spandrel glass, as a recommendation from our preservation technologists, will be applied to closely match the base, the existing base. We will restore and repair the best we can the grills, which are part of the original facade. That will all be done too. The side panels or the cream vitrolite will all remain. So essentially the whole storefront itself is going to remain its original condition and be restored. There is some cracked pieces. We'll try to restore that as best we can. The resin and apparently soap and water cleaning the sign is supposed to, be a good method of bringing that back again, like to its original luster. The doors are painted blue like they are originally. And when we remove the existing glass, which is large 1/4-inch plate glass, which has silicone joints, we'll be installing almost like a bifolding 1/4-inch tempered glazing set in an aluminum frame, brushed aluminum frame. That will be suspended. There's a steel beam up above the top of the brine sign. We'll be bringing down structure to support this glass. It'll be bottom supported on the sill and top supported at the head. As it's retracted, all the panels will be on the inside of the restaurant, not proud of the building. So when this is in the closed position, which generally it will be during inclement weather or during the winter, we're trying to make it appear as much as possible because there are no frames at the joints like a large plate glass section. There will be a corner 1.25 by 1.5 piece of metal receiver, which will go in, which is not currently in existence. That is a butt glazed detail. These windows wouldn't operate without some sort of closure on the ends near the door. And as Lisa said, the tapered areas going into the front entry will be fixed windows to match. The Fowles sign, I don't know if we've ever talked about that, will obviously remain. And the Caswells have agreed to be good stewards of that sign, which I think is great. It's a beautiful sign. The sign for Brine exists today as a blade sign. And they want to add a Brine sign and logo on the existing vitrolite sign banner. And to do that, the original lettering, a lot of it faded, a lot of it missing, will be removed and again cleaned. And then the Brine sign will be applied and painted on similar to what the original intent was. The original incised lettering will remain, but it will be ghosted, obviously behind the Brine sign. So I think that is our proposal, and we'd like to hand it back to Lisa, and we'll see if we have any questions from the commission.
So thank you, Dan. So I think with that, I don't think I have anything else to add. We've obviously provided the history, which is well known, of the storefront, and I think made pretty clear about what the intention is and the methodology. So with that, Mr. Chair, we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'll depart from my usual procedure. I'll go ahead and ask mine first, being greedy. Plus, I have something I'd like a little bit of further information to share with my colleagues. As I reviewed this, and I read through Dr. Selwyn's report, I thought it was very good. A lot of information had actually already been dug up by some of our team. But in any event, I asked her and this is, I think my colleagues on the board might be interested in this. I was concerned about that effect that the architect that Dan just described, where the Fowles paint being cleaned off, that would leave the what I think of as etching or incising. You'd still, if you at the right angles, it's more something you see in reflection. You'd still see that lettering, but with the new brine lettering would be just painted on over that. And if I understand correctly, I just want to make sure we're in agreement on this. It looked like you plan to replicate that same Art Deco font. But I asked Dr. Selwyn about that. Is that considered an appropriate treatment? And I wanted to sort of read her response. It's very short, so I'll just read it verbatim. She said, that's the point. That's just the point. The memory of the old use and sign remains. Fowles lives on, paren, in the background, close paren, and people can find brine. Only failing paint is removed. This action is completely reversible, and the original sign is not changed permanently or damaged. So I wanted to just share that with my colleagues, so that in case any of them had a similar concern that I had about the treatment of that flat banner sign. There are some errors, at least one, possibly, well, two. One you've verbally corrected, but it's still an error in the page we're looking at. Exist black fiber panel typical fiber. What is that?
Yeah, that is a mistake. That should be glass vitrolic panel.
Okay, so I know that you're quite correct on the post that's in the doorway. Yeah, I don't know what that is, whether it's Formica, whatever it is. I agree that's not appropriate covering. And I was happy to hear that you're planning to use, what's the term again?
Black spandrel glass.
Yeah, black spandrel glass. Would I be correct? I think that's going to pretty much look very similar to the way the Vitrolite looks.
Very similar with the gloss, yes.
Yeah, so there are one or two of those black panels below. I think one of them is actually near that grate on that left side that also, for whatever reason, were replaced. So do you plan to do this similar thing there? Just put black spandrel glass in there to try to at least replace it with something that's more or less appropriate and similar?
That was the intention, but since it's adjacent to existing to remain, we really want to look at a mock-up and make sure it's appropriate.
Yeah, okay.
Or look for salvage material.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be even better. And I know Selma did mention that in her, narrative. The other thing is, it's if the little cloud to the right of that sketch says "galv panel to remain," and you use the term galvanized. I suggest you go down there with a magnet. You will find out that that is not galvanized. It's aluminum. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you. I think, let me see if I have any other quick questions for you guys, and I'll turn over to my peers. So yeah, that's a correction. So, so it sounds like you said yourself that you're working with Dr. Selwyn. I think that's great. I think she had a lot of good suggestions. If you plan to follow her recommendations, I think you'll have a good result that is compliant with the kinds of preservation standards. And you've kind of hinted at that. So is that your intention to, because she also had some recommendations. There was a little cracked piece that she explained how that could be repaired and so on. So would I be correct to say that it's your intention to follow Dr. Selwyn's recommendations?
Absolutely, we're a team. Yeah, she'll be instrumental in the restoration of the facade.
Well, that's good to hear. All right, so let me turn over to, does any of my colleagues have a question or comment for either the architect or Attorney Mead? Joe, sorry, your hand first.
Yes, I just wondered if you could advance the slide deck a couple of images. It looks like you have something on the glazing panel there, 22.
Yeah.
So this is a non-insulated window. It's just a 1/4-inch single plate light. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So this will give us the best this will give us the best reproduction of kind of the fishbowl appearance of the glazing as it was originally intended in the Art Deco style, I think.
Yeah, I think that was the idea, Joe.
Okay.
In fact, I don't know if you read Dr. Selman's analysis, that's pretty much what she said, and that, you know, those window systems that were was put in the 40s, and there was an implication there that the actual glass may have been replaced at some point, probably not the one that was originally installed in 1941, but at any rate, they had whole systems that had extruded aluminum, you know, brackets to hold the glass and this and that, and they hope that you know, there's a whole system, right? And the idea was to have that expanse of glass uninterrupted by mountains, etc. And the available code compliant, you know, structurally sound
Yes.
solution that's available today is this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Richards. I have another question though for the architect, please. Just for my own curiosity, I'd like to understand a little bit better, how do these panels, when they close, how do they seal and provide, I'm just curious, this is my own information, provide comfort for people seated along the exterior. I assume there's additional heating apparatus or whatever inside, but is there a comfort issue with these? I've only seen these used on interiors of malls. On an exterior facade, would they provide the comfort required for the people seated inside?
No, it's exactly right, Joe, that the joints they're sealed as best as possible, but there is some probably discomfort if there's wind-blown air, but we will be providing additional HVAC and possible infrareds above the window, hidden above the window, behind in a soffit,
right,
to supplement that.
Do you have to submit any kind of energy calcs to comply with code?
I don't think we're doing anything different than what exists today, and an historic building is exempt from the energy code. It's basically, we're going to make the best step forward that we can and try to get this thing to be as comfortable as possible for the patrons.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks for your comments.
Okay, yep. Thank you, Joe. Peter McNamee, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, I like this solution. It is in keeping with what exists. But I do have a couple of questions. I'm looking at the manufacturer's website and I'm not seeing much more detail than what is in the deck here. My question is the same as Joe's with regard to how weather tight they are, and I would question beyond providing additional heating for comfort inside, how does that solve the problem of wind-driven rain or that sort of thing, just wet permeating the building? That's one question. The other is I'd like more information on that channel that they fit into at either end, because I'm not seeing anything on the manufacturer's website, which is not a great website. So maybe it's there and I just haven't been smart enough to find it. I'd like to make sure that is not going to be something with a great big footprint that's going to close that space down visually. But that's really a secondary question. The primary question is I still have trouble with those seams. I love the idea, and I'd love to see it work, but that worries me.
Yeah, I think having mullions or some sort of gasketing would take away from the effect that we're trying to achieve. This has been a long haul to try to discover something which would work well, replicating the original intent. Again, most of the time it's going to be decent weather, and I think the HVAC equipment can override any discomfort that people would be having with this. And in the wintertime, there has been a talk discussion about installing clear interior storms if need be. But I think at the end of the day, that seam will be tight enough that there won't be that much discomfort that can't be overcome by the HVAC equipment. And again, this is meant to look like one, as best as possible, one clear sheet of glass. and not change so much the outward appearance of the storefront.
Okay, thank you. As I said, I like this solution and I really would like to see it work. I still have the same questions. We are in New England, so I think that weather factor is a significant factor.
Thank
So
you.
I wish you luck finding that solution.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought of that possible solution of an interior storm that's removable, and used seasonally.
Mhm.
That might be a possible solution because
That's a possible, if I could, Glenn,
Yeah.
that is a possible solution, but again, we are in New England, so there
Yep.
are
Oh yeah.
wind-driven elements,
Yep.
even when there's an interior layer put in, and then things are caught between layers, and
Yep. Oh
that's
yeah.
distorted. So
Yep. No, I hear you. And fortunately, we don't have to figure out how to do that. But yeah, so a lot of these things are a challenge. Anyone else? Your hand is still up, Peter. You all set?
only to say that whatever solution to that problem, that challenge, the only thing that worries me is the solution may create an entirely different visual result. So
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah. So I think that's the kind of thing that we would have to include in our advisory report. I think that's a good point to include in that.
But
that cautionary note.
If I may, Glenn, just one more time to reiterate, Dan, I do think that Dr. Selwyn and you have come up with a very good solution, and I hope you can find a solution to that particular problem.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have a comment or question from the board? If not, now, our job here is to, our job, your job is to convey to me your concerns as you've been doing. I'll need to draft a advisory report for the planning board. Attorney Mead, I assume that, that you will be, I don't believe you have any application before the planning board yet. Is that your intention to submit one for, these proposed changes?
Yeah, Mr. Richards, yes, 2 points related to the ordinance. We're not permitted to submit to the planning board until 30 days after we have submitted to you, or which time you submit your advisory report, whichever is sooner, right? So I can't submit an application to the planning board yet. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and respectfully, I think all of this discussion has been really great, but I'm a lawyer and I'm reading the ordinance, and I would remind the commission that in fact their job in an advisory review is regarding the significance of the historic building or structure and the proposed for demolition and the relative importance of such historic building or structure to its setting within the DOD, which is a little different than some of the last part of this discussion you've had.
Okay. And I reviewed that as well, I guess, and I saw that 30-day thing, and the way I guess the way I read that was slightly differently, but that's fine. That's fine. It's not my concern. I just but the intention is at the appropriate time that you'll go before the planning board and they will have the advisory report. Now, a more pertinent question is, in the past, do you have would you prefer that we come back that a draft report be reviewed by the board, as we've sometimes done in the past, so that you could be assured that it reflects the entire view of this board? Or are you, given, I don't know, time constraints, whatever, do you care about that? I guess is what I'm saying. I think you know what I'm referring to.
I do, Mr. Chair, and I think that obviously the commission all has its. I mean, this is pretty unanimous. I think everybody's in agreement relative to this proposal, and so I don't particularly have everybody has had basically the same comments. So I don't have a concern that the chair draft that advisory report. I just remind the chair about what the advisory report is supposed to focus on.
Okay. Let me double check my notes, see here if I think I've asked all my questions. Hey, Caitlin, could you go to slide 21 for a quick second? Okay, this one doesn't, when I called it up, there was some odd anomalies. I assume the blue just reflects the doors. I think that's what that is. There's a kind of a gray oval blob over the N of brine. Is that just an artifact of this?
Shadow.
Oh, is that what this
Shadow
supposed
from
to
the
be?
sign.
Oh, okay. Could have
I
fooled
told them
me.
to take that off. They didn't.
All right. Okay. Then I think let me cut that. Okay, looks like looking over my notes, looks like my questions have been answered, so I don't have anything further. I think I think we're good on that. We should be able to have a draft report done within the next couple of weeks, especially if we're not meeting in November. That'll should give me plenty of time to do that, and we'll certainly have the I'll notify you, Attorney Mead, when that's ready for you to take a look at, and also obviously the planning board.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, members of the commission.
Yeah, and yeah, you're welcome. And I would say that there was a question I had that wasn't in my notes. That's why I forgot it. But I'm pretty sure I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure. Way back in the beginning, the first proposal included increasing the size of those openings, which would have involved some demolition, but it looks like that is no longer the case. That, for example, where that aluminum panel is beneath the Bitchlights signage up top, that all remains. So we're talking about the same openings, same look, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay, I thought so. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, well, very good. And I think the fact that you're working with a respected preservationist such as Dr. Selwyn is good. I think our report did a good job of kind of pointing the way forward to a good solution for this. So I hope that all works out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, there's just a few more things we can cover, I think, fairly quickly. I believe are Dennis and Lisa Flynn in attendance? Let's see. Yeah, I see Dennis Flynn in there. Caitlin, if you could
Hello?
talk. Yep. Yeah, is that you, Dennis?
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
hang on just a second. We'll give you the floor in just a moment. Just let me introduce this particular item on the agenda. This is authorization for approval of works where on a structure that's subject to a preservation restriction. Now, 262 Merrimack Street, just around the corner from me, actually, that's also known as the so-called 1690 house, even though the house itself doesn't date to 1690. That's kind of its nickname for other reasons. Anyway, the house is under a preservation restriction. They would like to install a retractable awning over a patio that's in the back. It's in the rear of the building. And this is considered an alteration that is significant enough to require review by the NHC and approval before they can go ahead with it. It's not just routine maintenance, that type of thing. So just to remind the commission, the way this works is that a preservation restriction is designed to protect the historical integrity of the structure. So typically it would prohibit, the removal of historic characteristic features, that sort of thing. It does not necessarily mean you can't touch the house, but it does mean that anytime you're going to do something, such as in this case, you're going to attach something semi-permanently to an exterior wall, that needs to be reviewed and approved. So that's why Dennis and Lisa Flynn are here tonight. So with that, do you want to make a brief statement explaining what it is you want to do and so forth, Mr. Flynn?
Sure, thank you. Dennis Flynn at 262 Merrimack. This awning is going on the back of the house, which is the east elevation on the preservation restriction. The sun beats in pretty hard in the morning, and we're trying to design it so that we can enjoy the backyard and see this is the only area of the backyard that we can see the river from, that we have a view. We just want to have the awning to be able to put out over there. The only thing I'd point out that isn't in the letter is that my reading of the preservation restriction is that the things that would do to be preserved were mainly on the other three facades and not on the back facade of the house. Not that, we could change anything we wanted to, but I don't think this terribly affects the viewing area of the house from the street or from anywhere other than the condo area. We've got approval of from the condo association to do this, and our neighbors to the right of us, as you're looking at the back of the house, and to the rear of us have approved the awning as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I did drive by there, Mr. Flynn. I noticed that you can see it on this particular photo. There's that wooden kind of rail fence, whatever you want to call it, to the right. And there's also one on the other side, and foliage and so forth. So that patio is somewhat shielded from the public view, especially because of its elevation being somewhat higher than the street and so on. And I did have one question, but first I'll let my colleagues see if they have any questions for you. Does anyone have a concern or question as to what exactly is proposed here? Give a moment. While you're thinking about whether or not to ask a question, I'll go ahead and ask mine, because I did have one. Could you go back? I think it's slide 4, Caitlin. Mr. Flynn, are these awnings available in a solid color versus stripes?
No, not that I know of.
The reason I ask is because, I'll speak for myself. I don't really have any problem with this. It doesn't remove any characteristic feature. It's not a permanent change that physically destroys part of the house. It's reversible, all that good stuff. So it's not anything that can't be undone in the future and so on. But I am a little concerned about it looking rather how it's going to affect the historic nature of that structure, given that it is a good example. It's been the exterior anyway has been well preserved as a historic structure. And my only concern is that the striped awning is going to kind of stick out a bit like a sore thumb, if you will. And but if it was just a solid natural color canvas, or maybe just like a solid green or something that traditionally was commonly seen on older buildings in town, it wouldn't be quite so glaring. So I'll throw that out there, and I'd love to hear from any of my colleagues if they have any concerns like that, or if it's just me. Like I know, well, anyone, Joe, Mark, Peter, anyone have any thoughts on that?
I don't have that concern. I think
No.
Striped, colored, I think it's all good.
Okay, thank you.
No concerns.
No, so just me, huh? Okay. Very good. And the one that's circled, Ashford Forest 4995, is that the one you plan to go with?
Yes.
Okay, well, at least of the ones showing there, that is probably the least
Garish.
contrasty and flashy one. So that probably is the least offensive one. It sounds like people aren't too perturbed by this. I think someone might be in a position to make a motion to approve this addition, or not, it's not an addition, approve this erection of this awning, which I understand does require a building permit from the building commissioner because of its size. Is there such a motion?
So move, Mark.
Okay, Mark Sandrone, is that seconded?
I'll second it.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Okay, Malcolm, you still with us? Your vote on this to approve?
Approved.
Okay, thank you, Mark Sandrone.
Yes.
Thank you. And Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Chair is yes. So good. So Mr. and Mrs. Flynn, and that's sure the so I'll work with the planning board there, planning department, to work out the details of, making sure that it's noted that the board has reviewed this and has approved this change, so that you can go ahead with that awning. Okay.
Great, thank you.
And yeah, thank you for coming in and doing the prep work of talking to your neighbors and all that. That's all good. Okay, let's see if we can wrap this up expeditiously. The correspondence, just a couple of quick things. There was 2 of these things were letters from the Mass Historical Commission. One was to Ben Taylor of Mead, Tolerant and Costa. That was just at the the preservation restriction for 342 Merrimack Street has been approved by the NMHC. You might recall this one. A number of you did a site visit out there. This is the one on Merrimack Street up where that other street kind of veers off at an angle up towards the plant up there on the river side of Merrimack Street. Also, the 64 Purchase Street preservation restriction has been approved by the MHC. That was the church that has applied for a grant from the Community Preservation Fund. So that has been approved, so that can be filed with the registry. So progress on those. And finally, there was an announcement from the Historical Commission, Mass Historical Commission, about the 2022 survey and planning grant cycle. We're still, I did speak briefly to Andy about where we are with ours, and he's promised to, move that forward somewhat. And I'm also going to talk to Patricia to see if there was anything that she had started work on. I think she's pretty much already forwarded that to Caitlin and others at the planning office, but we'll just check on that, make sure that ball doesn't get dropped, and we can go ahead and send that out to bid soon, so we don't miss any deadlines. That's to update our historical survey. So I won't take any real time on the updates from the chair, just to, that now the vice chair position is open. What I think will probably happen is, since we're at the end of the year here, the chair and the vice chair typically, well, not typically, they do get elected each January. So I'd like, search your souls to see if someone would like to think about vice chair. In essence, all it is, there's nothing required beyond what you normally do on the commission. But my view of the role of the vice chair is I do keep them informed and copied on all my communication with the people in the planning office, that they are fully informed of what's going on, so that in the event that I can't run a meeting, chair a meeting, they are comfortably in a position to do that. And so we don't have any, hiccups in that process. And I know, I just remind folks, if anyone was interested in that Community Preservation Committee assignment, it's a relatively easy one. So I would encourage you again to talk to Caitlin about that. She can tell you all about what is and isn't required. It's a fairly easy assignment, not a heavy workload on that. So I would encourage folks on that. That's all I have. If nobody, this is your opportunity to raise your hand if you have anything you want to add. If not, the chair is perfectly willing to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of October 14th. Hopefully you've looked at the draft. I found them to be okay. Does anyone care to make a motion to approve those minutes or have a problem with them?
I move to approve the minutes from October 14. This is Joe.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
Mark Sennett, I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sandrone. Let's see, Malcolm, you approve the minutes?
Yep.
Okay, Mark Sandrone.
Yes.
Okay, Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Yes, the chair is a yay on that as well. The only thing left is a motion to adjourn, unless anybody has anything else. Sounds like you don't. Don't see any hands or anything. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, I heard Chris the most prominent on that. There were a couple. Is it seconded?
Second.
Okay, I think that was Mark Syndrome, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Malcolm?
Yep.
Adjourn? Okay,
Yep.
Mark Syndrome?
Mark, yep.
Thank you. Chris Fay?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Thank you. And the chair is also a yay. So we officially adjourn this meeting. Thank you once again for your work on this. And as always, for everything you do, unpaid, I might add, for the city and on this job. Appreciate it very much and bid you all good night.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Chair.
thank you.
I don't.
You.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.